So Lawrence, you made a film called Prince and the Showgirl, which you directed and acted in with Mэрilin Monro. What was she like to work with?
Well, she was a very curious little person. She was there's a proper word for it, but I think it always sounds very horrid. She was a divided personality. When I first met her, I thought she was the most enchanting thing I'd ever met in my life. And it was impossible then, when she was like that, and she was like that in ordinary life, it was impossible not really to fall a little bit in love with her, absolutely at first meeting. And I was looking forward madly to working with her because I admired her so much. I thought she was a witty actress as well as being so ravishingly lovely. And I was longing to do a film with somebody like that. And it was a very exciting prospect for me, but it didn't work out to be either exciting or enjoyable. And I found out the reason for this later. She was always late, sometimes 4 hours late. Now that obviously isn't just being naughty. That's obviously something that's a sort of something chronic. I mean, that's a problem, that is. She would she'd say, just a minute, I have to be excused for a minute. And I'd know it would be an hour and a half before I got her back. And she used to get rather bad-tempered, and people used to get rather frightened of her after a bit. I used to get rather frightened. But after a while, there wasn't an assistant who'd go and call her. And Jack Cardiff, who was the cameraman in those days, he and I used to take it in turns to call Mэрilin onto the set. But she had a lot to offer, but what we had wasn't the right thing to offer her. She was marvellous at just saying a very simple little line of about 7 words, and she could do it as nobody else could do that. Terence Rattigan, who wrote the thing, wrote it. He wrote comic literature. He wrote a beginning, a middle, and an end. A joke, a joke, a joke, a joke, and a ba-bum joke at the end. And that had to be, you had to build that, you had to architect that. And she couldn't understand that sort of thing. She'd been through the studio school in New York, and she had got her little head filled with all sorts of ideas I don't think she could cope with about realism. And she had never thought about realism in her little younger days at all. When she first hit the screen with such a splash and everybody fell all over the aisles for her, she wasn't thinking about realism or any style or anything of the kind. She was just herself, and what she had to give was just that. Now that precious thing, I think, was spoilt by people talking big to her and giving her all sorts of intellectual ideas that she simply couldn't cope with, but yet she tried to, because she was just married to Arthur Miller, who after all is a big intellectual. And so it was a problem, and she was a very terribly, new phrase I know, mixed up kid at the time. It was a very painful thing. It was rather humiliating. She wouldn't know how humiliating she was being to a person. And we finished up somehow. We got the picture on schedule, within budget, somehow or other. And it came on these sort of terms. Finally, I sent a message to Mэрilin saying, look, I've seen the picture, and as far as I'm concerned, I was producing it and directing. I said, I am perfectly happy with it, Mэрilin, perfectly happy with it. But I must tell you, I'm not happy about yourself. I know you could do better. It's up to you if you will or if you won't. If you'd like to come and see it with me, I'll run it with you. And I just need 2 days. I absolutely pack-struck each little bit of set that I needed, and I had them all the way around the studio. And I shot that, I got them. She said, yes, all right, she'd agree. I said, I am so glad. I really am, because I want you to make a wonderful success in this. I want you to make the most wonderful you've ever made, you know. I was perfectly happy otherwise, and I knew that I couldn't suffer. As a director, I didn't think so. And as an actor, I didn't think so. So she accepted, and she did it. In my absolute horror, she took the whole of one morning making the first scene, and she couldn't remember it. And I remember she had a mentor with her, a sort of guide, a spiritual comforter and guide that came from the departments of this sanctified kind of theatre that existed in New York, I heard her say, now Mэрilin, all you've got to think of is Coca-Cola and Frankie Sinatra. And What one was up again. However, we finished it, and we've said that. Then, on the way through with it under my arm, I went across the New York show to Jack Warner. There, Milton Green was her producer, the man who invented her company. And he said, hey, while I've got you, I'm sorry, you've got to have a session with Mэрilin. I have no explanation. I said, no, thank you very much. Anybody else can say it's me? I don't. No, thank you very much. And they said, no, I'm sorry, you've got to. And so I did. And he knew how to treat Mэрilin. And right early on, I remember Irina Baronova. Do you remember her marvelous dancer? She's a great, darling friend of mine. And she came and watched one day and said, you know what's the matter with that girl? She inside, somewhere or other, she doesn't want to act. She wants to show herself. That's another thing. She is a model by accident or by a villainy of nature, forced to be an actress. That's the answer to her. And I thought about that and said, fine, it's not helping me get through the play. However, I did get through, as I said, and here was this still session where I was simply dreading. And she was like an angel. And he'd say, Mэрilin, just show a little bit more of that right titty. Just look up at Larry, will you? Just give it a little more. Stick your ass a little more into him, will you? I said, yes, anything. Yes, absolutely. You never saw a child so happy in your life. And I realized then she really, her métier was to be a model. And there was something in her that resisted being an actress, in that she had to go onto a floor and do it. You'd never know it when it was easy to her, when she got it by some glorious circumstance or other. I don't know. I very seldom got it. I didn't make the best out of Mэрilin. Other directors have done much better with her than I did. But I was reminded a little while later of the Mэрilin that I knew, and the Mэрilin that I really fell for was when she was first engaged to Arthur Miller. And Arthur Miller's people are very Orthodox Jews. And they went there and they said, I hope, Mэрilin, you like the matzo balls. Matzo balls are sort of like an unleavened bread that you put in soup and eat. Oh, she said, yes, they're just fine. So they went the next weekend and said, so much Mэрilin, she liked the matzo balls last weekend. Again, we get Mэрilin the matzo balls. She said, oh, they're just fine. And dinner time, she said, Mэрilin ate the matzo balls at lunch, so at dinner time, again, we give her once more the matzo balls. And she said, I hope it's all right, honey. And she said, well, they're just fine, she said, but isn't there any other part of a matzo you can eat? Well, that was what could be to see. That was the sort of creature one met the first time. Marvellous, this sort of gay, lovely, light, sweet little wit, and the ravishing looks. And she was absolutely irresistible.